Next up, we have Whitney Williams to kind of bring a more regional and state outlook to what's going on, and grateful to have Whitney with us. She is CEO of a company called Williams Works. She's worked alongside Fortune 500 companies, charities, and to help solve complex problems, including working with companies during disaster times and pandemics, similar to what we're experiencing now. Whitney's also running for governor for the state of Montana, so she brings us a kind of a middle of the campaign pause and moment. So thank you for taking some time, Whitney, to join us today.
Sure, thanks, Eric.
Wonderful. Whitney, you've traveled across the state, and now you're having to do it a little more virtually for your campaign and talk to people in every corner of our state. What's your read on how Montana's coping with COVID and how the state's faring so far?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Well, I so appreciate everyone being on, and I've learned a lot in the last 45 minutes. So thank you, everybody. Hey, look, I mean, I think everybody has said a version of this, but Montanans are really strong and resilient. And this is an unparalleled moment, no question about it. But I think folks are optimistic. I think people have been, we've been doing a bunch of sort of virtual town halls. So talking with people sort of every day like this and in different settings. I think folks are worried now about the things they were worried about when I first got in this race 6 months ago. They're worried about affordable housing. They're worried about the high price of pharmaceuticals. They're worried about healthcare in general. We talked a little bit about broadband and cellular. I think that this, crisis has really unearthed a lot of the inequities and a lot of the challenges in this state that needed tending to before and certainly do now. So if there's a silver lining, I think at least it's showing us what some of those are. But look, I think folks are, feeling extremely grateful, without question. I think everyone has, felt this great deal of gratitude toward neighbors. There's just this beautiful spirit that exists, I think, in all of us here in Montana, that sort of willingness to pull each other out of a ditch or, wave from behind the wheel, none of that's changed. And I think that reality of neighbors helping neighbors is coming out in full force right now. So that makes me very optimistic. While there's, certainly tremendous challenges, and we can talk about more, today or another time about what some of those are. But I do think folks are pretty optimistic that we're going to come through this, but that it's going to be tough, and it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take some new ideas and new leadership and new approaches, and a lot of relationships, certainly with the federal government and the private sector, to get back on track.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we live through -30, we have to be resilient. So you've consulted businesses and lived through other, pandemics. I wouldn't say on the same level as this, obviously, but some pretty substantial ones. What consulting would you give to small business owners or people that are, have that fear in coming into this next quarter or year that we're facing?
Yeah, I have. I work a lot in developing, the developing world. So a lot of where the sort of bottom billion, they call those folks who are living on sort of $1 a day, live. And after people who've been sort of struck by, hurricane or disease or some kind of, drought, et cetera, it's tough to rebuild from those things, but it is possible. And I think for small businesses, of which I am one, my business is also, feeling the effects and impact of this as well as everyone else's. I think we just need to do what we can to both be in touch very regularly with local, state, and sort of federal resources to see what can be made available. I will say to Lauren, one of the things on the nonprofit side, I work extensively with nonprofits as well as, just making sure that you guys have done such a good job just doing exactly what you're doing and communicating well with people about what types of resources are available, and then continuing to raise them from other pockets if we can find them, to bring people together to make sure that we, again, solve for what's going to be the sort of short, medium, and long term. This is going to be a difficult road for sure, but I think working together and bringing together new ideas and new approaches and new, bringing everyone around the table to make sure that we problem solve our way through this is the way we've always done things. And I think it's the way we're going to continue to. We just need now to move with, a little bit more urgency on some of these issues in the short term, I think.
Absolutely. People listening to this town hall, and once again, you're kind of, being able to bounce around the state and have a state perspective on it. Do you have any advice for if people want to get more involved in the recovery effort outside of our community? Are there pockets of needs that you see out there, or ways that you might suggest to them getting involved?
Yeah, I think there are a number of ways, and I think certainly, as Lauren mentioned, the foundation and the nonprofits there locally, but the state has a community foundation as well that I think has done a really good job at sort of starting to capture the variety of needs from, food banks to everything, educational resources, resources for seniors, resources in housing sector. I think the Montana Community Foundation has also done a really nice job at sort of trying to aggregate some of that information. So I hope that folks can look there as well. And we can also, Eric, post some other resources. I think that Governor Bullock, I think, has done a really good job at sort of pulling together what is in a very difficult moment. And I think they've also got some good resources to drive people and direct people who want to do more or want to help.
Excellent. Well, and then that'd be great. And we'd love to share that on our platform with everybody listening today.
Yeah,
I think there's certainly, a lot of communities in Montana that don't have the resources that Big Sky has. And I think that it's a lot of people in our community, we've heard it's our job to be a good neighbor and make sure that we're helping out the balance of the state that might not be in the same position that we are.
Yeah, totally, Eric. I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I think we were in the middle of a 56 county tour on my campaign when this happened, and we were spending lots of time in very rural communities and small towns across the state, including in really far eastern Montana, where my lieutenant governor candidate Buzz Matlin is from, and Roosevelt County and Culbertson is where he comes from. And you look over there and sort of start to see what's happened with sort of communities, these rural communities whose schools may be closing altogether, or they may, like in Sydney, be going from a 5-day school week to a 4-day school week already before any of this happened. And so I appreciate you sort of calling out to some of the communities that, just don't have resources and already were really hard hit from, the tariffs, from, the difficulty of, being able to sell their crops from all these sort of farms and ranches being locked off, in communities across the state. So there's a lot of need and a lot of challenges and a lot of ways to help neighbors who don't live next door.
Absolutely. And last question before I hand it over to Joe. I mean, obviously this COVID situation hit right in the middle of everyone's campaign, including yours. How has this affected the campaign process, and how are you seeing you and the people that you're running against or with? How is everyone adjusting to this campaign process during this time?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that we are all in the same boat in many ways, and that we can't sort of knock on doors, which is what we were doing, and meet in living rooms in the way that, you want to do when you're trying to serve the people. And so I think that's made it more complicated. I love that part of the work the most, is just meeting Montanans and hearing what's on folks' minds and getting ideas from people. And so that's changed. We've just taken it online. So I think not unlike some of the other campaigns, we're just doing, virtual town halls and as many kind of community meetings as we can do, so we can still continue to hear from folks. And this platform, Zoom and Facebook, have worked, I think, really well, again, for all of us, whether I happen to be a Democrat, but our Republican friends, I think, are doing the same thing. And, we'll just keep at it. We have every belief that we're probably not going to be able to campaign in the way that we were intending to. And so you just pivot, which is what you do when you're a business person, like most of the people on this phone, and like Montanans, we figure it out. So it's made things a little more complicated in some regards, but it's also been really nice. Like, I'm just looking out at everyone's faces now. When you do have a few weeks where you're not connecting live with people, it's really nice to be able to do so online. And so people have been signing up to do that, which we really, really appreciate.
Excellent. Joe, anything from the audience?
Yeah, I've got a question here. Whitney, thanks again for joining us on this town hall. I really appreciate your time. You mentioned rural communities and the needs that they have. What is being done and what should be done at a statewide level in regards to online digital education and those tools required for rural schools and teachers?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just start with, I forget who it was, Candace maybe, who was talking about broadband and cellular, both fiber and cell. We have got, I mean, again, pre-COVID, we've been talking about moving with urgency into, sort of a future where 30% of Montanans who are currently underserved can get served. I mean, come on, we're the United States of America. We live in Montana, for goodness sake. We should all be able to communicate. And hasn't this sort of crisis uncovered what's actually happening here, which is that a lot of folks who now need to do, schooling can't, but they can't reliably because they don't have access. And I believe infrastructure, just like certain water gets supported by the state and state dollars because it is infrastructure, it's critical infrastructure. We would all agree with that. I happen to believe broadband is as well. And I think we need to start including it as a state in infrastructure. And now, again, I think maybe we have a moment because folks are seeing how critically important it is that everybody be connected. We just need to make sure that we get that done. And that's one of those things I think Montanans agree with. I think they understand how centrally important it is to sort of our day-to-day and to our future. And so hopefully, we can get that done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, broadband's definitely an important component of that. Do you feel like a lot of these rural schools are equipped equipment-wise, tools-wise, computers?
No, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. And we've got to help them both with, assets, hardware, but broadband as well.
Got it. Just give me 1 second here.
Sure.
So, yeah. So, you're a 6th generation Montanan. I'd like to hear just your thoughts about what you know about the people of Montana in times of crisis, and what has surprised you about this particular virus and the response of Montanans?
Yeah, my family came here during the gold rush. My mom's family did, and then my dad's family immigrated here. We all got here how we got here. My family, happened to be some of the early settlers in Montana. And, I think that sort of idea, I think about my great grandma coming through Yellowstone, what is now Yellowstone Park, in a covered wagon, and thinking about all these families, like so many of you, who homesteaded, and that sort of grit and toughness that it takes to do that in the first place. Certainly, I feel lucky that got passed down those generations to me. But I think it is, what I said at the beginning about that sort of idea that, you don't ever see just one car on the side of the road in Montana, right? You always see two because someone stopped to pull a neighbor out of a ditch. And I just think it's our willingness to connect with and support community and our neighbors that makes this place really special, and maybe makes, is the reason that we are all here in many ways. It's that sort of waving from behind the wheel. I mean, we all have, friends, we've all traveled to other places that are not Montana, and you see how that's just not the case. And that lovely spirit and attitude of, togetherness and working together that makes us Montanans. We know we don't build a barn or a fence on our own out here. So I think that spirit is alive and well in this state. And I mean, it's one of the things that makes me very proud to be a Montanan. And I think that that's exactly the same spirit that's going to get us through this, by helping our neighbors and helping small businesses. I mean, look at all of the people, and I hope this can continue to happen, who are, buying gift cards from local businesses, who are doing everything they can for elderly neighbors, who are showing up at the food banks in Missoula, where I am, or, wherever you all might be. I think there is an outpouring of support, and it's not going to be easy. We're going to need a lot of support from each other, and we're going to need a lot of continued support from the federal government and from businesses and innovators across the globe to get through this. But I think we will.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of resilience in this state and in the people. Well, thank you, Whitney. Really very much appreciate it.